Close your eyes and let the world around you fade into silence. Tonight, we journey not across roads or kingdoms, but across the sea, an ancient sea, vast and restless, painted by poets as wine dark. Upon its waves drifts a story older than empires, older than memory, a tale of a man who longed only to go home. His name was Odysseus. His journey, the Odyssey. It begins where triumph ends. Troy has fallen, its walls broken, its towers in flame. The Greeks have returned victorious, yet for one man, the war is not truly over. Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, clever and restless, sets sail for his island home, for his wife, Penelope, for his son, Telemachus, who has grown without him. But fate, as always, is not so easily crossed. The Odyssey is more than a voyage. It is the journey of memory against forgetting, of home against exile, of light against shadow. Gods and monsters rise from the waves, testing not only the strength of men, but the endurance of the soul. At every shore, Odysseus must choose between desire and duty, temptation and truth. And as the waves rise and fall, so too does the rhythm of the tale. Gentle, hypnotic, flowing as though the sea itself speaks. For the Odyssey is not merely a story of return, it is the story of all who wander, of all who search for a place where their heart can rest. As you drift into this tale, let the waves carry you. Let the whispers of the wine-dark sea guide you. For the journey of Odysseus is about to begin. The story begins not on the open sea, but at the smouldering gates of Troy. After 10 long years of siege, the city that had defied the Greeks finally lay in ruin. Its towers toppled, its people scattered, its name destined to echo through time. The Greeks had achieved their victory not through brute strength, but through cunning, through a gift of wood shaped like a horse, left at Troy's gates as though abandoned in retreat. Inside the hollow belly of that horse hid Odysseus and his chosen warriors. Patiently they waited, while the Trojans, believing themselves safe, dragged the structure into their city. By night, the Greeks slipped from hiding, opened the gates, and unleashed destruction. Flames consumed the proud city, and with it ended a war born from the wrath of gods and the desires of men. Odysseus stood among the victors, his stratagem the key to their triumph. Yet even in that moment of glory, he longed for the hills of Ithaca, for the quiet hearth where Penelope waited, for the embrace of his young son Telemachus. He had fought for honor, for kingship, for alliances bound by oaths, but now his heart yearned only for home. The Greeks departed Troy in scattered fleets, each seeking their own return. Yet the gods watched closely, for not all were pleased with the sack of Troy. Poseidon, lord of the sea, nursed a quiet anger. Athena, goddess of wisdom, would aid Odysseus at times, but even her hand could not shield him from every fate. The war had ended, but the greater trial was yet to come. As Odysseus boarded his ship, the horizon stretched before him like a promise and a warning. He swore to return, to reclaim his place as king and husband, to see Ithaca once more. But oaths, like waves, often break upon the rocks of destiny. Imagine him there, the smoke of Troy still rising behind him, the salt air filling his lungs, his men weary yet hopeful. The sails catch the wind, and the ships move forward into the unknown. They do not yet know how long the sea will hold them, nor how many will survive the journey. Only this is certain: the path home will not be straight, nor simple, nor merciful. The journey of Odysseus has begun. The sea is vast, and in its vastness lie both promise and peril. For days, Odysseus and his men sailed onward, their sails straining against the wind, their oars dipping rhythmically into the wine-dark waters. At times the sea was kind, offering calm skies and steady breezes. At other times it churned, rising in storms that threatened to shatter hulls and drown men in its depths. Yet, through it all, the vision of Ithaca remained a guiding star until they reached a place where memory itself began to fade. One morning, after a night of restless waves, the ships found refuge upon a quiet shore. The land before them seemed peaceful, touched by sunlight, its hills green, its trees heavy with fruit. No enemies stood waiting with spear or sword. Instead, the air carried a sweet fragrance, soft and inviting. It seemed, at first, a gift of the gods. The people of this land came forth with smiles and open hands. They bore no weapons, spoke no threats. Instead, they offered food, strange blossoms, petals of the lotus plant, golden in color, and fragrant with a sweetness unlike any known fruit. The weary men, grateful for kindness after so much hardship, accepted eagerly. But the lotus was no ordinary food. To taste it was to surrender memory. The men who ate felt their burdens dissolve, their oaths forgotten, their longing for home erased. Their eyes grew heavy with dreamy calm, their hearts filled with contentment. No longer did they think of Ithaca, or of wives and children waiting across the sea. Instead, they wished only to remain here, in this land of softness, where struggle was unknown and the pain of memory vanished. Imagine them reclining upon the grass, lotus blossoms in hand, their laughter slow, their voices languid. They gazed not upon the horizon, but into the haze of forgetting. Their ships, their oars, their journey all seemed distant, unimportant. The sea that had once beckoned with both terror and promise was now meaningless. When Odysseus saw what had happened, his heart trembled. He understood at once the danger. For a man may fight against storm or spear, but what defense exists against the loss of will itself? Without memory, without the desire for home, all journeys end. The lotus was not death, but it was something worse. It was the gentle erasure of purpose. He moved among his men, calling them, urging them to return. But they turned away, smiling faintly, begging to remain. They spoke as though Ithaca were nothing more than a forgotten dream, a story told long ago. Some wept when he tried to rouse them, clinging to the lotus as if it were life itself. Odysseus, though grieved, acted with resolve. He would not abandon them, nor allow them to abandon their destiny. With strength, he dragged his men from the meadows, tore the lotus from their hands, and forced them back toward the ships. They cried out, pleading to stay, but he bound them to the benches, ordered the sails hoisted, and pushed from shore. The ships moved once more across the waves, the land of the lotus eaters fading into distance. Behind them remained the sweetness of forgetting. Before them stretched again the hard path of memory. The men, still drowsy, shed tears as the blossom's spell faded. Yet slowly their hearts began to stir again. Ithaca, once lost to them, returned to their minds like a light rising after darkness. The episode is brief, yet its lesson is deep. For in every journey lies the temptation to surrender, to let go of striving, to sink into the comfort of forgetting. The lotus asks no sacrifice, demands no struggle. It offers only peace, the soft oblivion of rest. But it is a peace that costs everything: family, home, destiny itself. Odysseus understood that true rest is found not in escape, but in completion. To surrender here would be to betray Penelope, Telemachus, and the life he longed for. And so, even against the will of his own men, he pulled them from forgetfulness and bound them again to the hard labor of the sea. As you drift with this tale, imagine the taste of the lotus upon your tongue. Sweet, fragrant, dissolving care. Imagine lying in the grass beneath gentle skies. No storms to fear, no wars to fight, no long voyage to endure. The temptation is strong, To stay would be easy, to forget would be bliss. Yet also, imagine the voice of memory calling you back, the face of someone waiting, the promise of a life unfinished. That call is harder, harsher, but it is real. It is the thread that binds you to purpose, to identity, to truth. Without it, you drift, nameless and forgotten, like a leaf upon the tide. When at last the ships moved beyond sight of the lotus land, the men regained themselves. Their eyes cleared, their voices steadied, and though sorrowful for what they had lost, they began again to row. The sea stretched before them, endless and demanding. The oars creaked, the waves whispered, and the memory of Ithaca returned like a beacon. But in their hearts remained the shadow of that place, the knowledge that forgetting is as dangerous as death, that the sweetest escape can be the most treacherous. They carried that memory forward, a reminder that home must be fought for not only against monsters and storms, but against the gentlest temptations of surrender. As you close your eyes now, imagine Odysseus standing at the prow, the wind pulling at his cloak, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Behind him, his men, weary yet restored, row with steady rhythm. Beneath them, the sea rolls onward, patient and vast. The land of forgetting has faded, but its shadow lingers, for the journey of life is filled with lotus blossoms, moments when forgetting seems easier than remembering, when drifting seems simpler than striving. Yet Odysseus's tale reminds us that to forget is to lose ourselves. To remember, even through suffering, is to remain whole. Beyond the land of the lotus eaters, Odysseus and his men pressed onward, their hearts once more bound to the dream of Ithaca. They braved the restless sea until they came to a rugged shore, a place wild and unshaped by human hands. It was the land of the Cyclops giants who lived without law, without councils, without the order of cities. Each dwelled alone in caves, caring only for themselves, answering to no king and no god, but their own hunger. Odysseus, ever curious, wished to see what kind of men or monsters lived here. Taking a band of his bravest companions, he set out from the ships and found a cavern vast and echoing, its floor strewn with cheeses, its shelves heavy with milk and curds. His men urged him to take the food and flee, but Odysseus lingered, eager for a gift of hospitality, eager to see the master of this house. That master soon returned, Polyphemus, a Cyclops, a giant with a single blazing eye. He drove his flocks into the cave, rolled a boulder across its mouth, and then saw the strangers within. Hospitality was not his custom. With a roar, he seized two men, dashed them against the stone, and devoured them raw. Odysseus's heart quaked, but he held firm. Night after night, the monster fed on his companions, while Odysseus plotted. At last, he offered Polyphemus wine, strong and sweet, and when the giant asked his name, Odysseus replied, "Call me nobody." Drunk and heavy with sleep, Polyphemus collapsed. Then Odysseus and his men drove a sharpened stake into the monster's eye, blinding him with fire and fury. The cave shook with his cries. Other Cyclopes came running, but when they asked who harmed him, Polyphemus wailed, "Nobody," and so they turned away, thinking him mad. At dawn, Odysseus and his men clung to the bellies of the sheep as the blind giant drove them out to pasture, escaping into the light of day. Yet pride undid what cunning had won. As they rowed away, Odysseus could not resist shouting his true name across the waves. Polyphemus, enraged, stretched his arms to the sky and prayed to his father, Poseidon, lord of the sea. Grant that Odysseus may never return home, or if he must, let it be long delayed, with sorrow and loss. The sea grew darker from that moment. For though Odysseus had outwitted the monster, he had awakened the wrath of a god. After escaping the fury of the Cyclops and the curse of Poseidon, Odysseus and his weary companions sailed onward, Their hearts still carried the terror of that cave and the weight of their losses. Yet the sea allowed no pause, no peace. Storms rose, winds shifted, and once more they found themselves upon the shore of a strange and fateful land. It was an island of beauty, hills green with forest, streams that glistened in the sun, meadows alive with birdsong. From a distance, it seemed a place of healing, a balm for bodies worn by hunger and spirits heavy with grief. Yet beauty can hide peril, and here, danger wore the face of wonder. This island was called Ea, home of Circe, the enchantress. Odysseus sent his men to explore, dividing them into groups. One such band, led by his loyal officer Eurylochus, found a hall of stone that gleamed in the light. Lions and wolves roamed its courtyard, not fierce but strangely tame, their eyes watchful yet calm, as though bewitched. From within came the voice of a woman, singing sweetly, her song floating like smoke upon the air. She welcomed the men with warmth, offering food and drink. Hungry and enchanted, they entered her hall, but Eurylochus, cautious, held back. He sensed danger in the sweetness, shadow in the welcome. Inside, the men feasted on Circe's banquet. Yet the food carried more than sustenance. It carried spells. With a gesture of her wand, Circe transformed them into swine. Their minds remained human, but their bodies became pigs, squealing and rooting upon the floor. Eurylochus fled, his heart hammering, and returned to Odysseus. Breathless, he told of what he had seen companions bewitched, their humanity stripped, their dignity turned to mud. Fear gripped the remaining crew. Should they flee, abandon their brothers to this fate? Or should they risk the same doom? Odysseus did not hesitate. His loyalty bound him to his men, and his courage bound him to action. He took his sword and bow and set out towards Circe's hall, alone. On his path, he was met by Hermes, the messenger of the gods. The god, swift and sly, appeared in the guise of a young man and offered Odysseus counsel. "You face a woman of great power," Hermes warned, "but I will arm you against her." He placed in Odysseus's hand a herb called moly, black at the root, white in flower, said to be proof against enchantments. Hermes told him, "When she strikes with her wand, draw your sword and charge. She will fear you, and then she will yield." With these words, the god vanished, leaving Odysseus with both warning and hope. Odysseus entered the hall. Circe welcomed him as she had his men, offering food and wine rich with enchantment. He drank, but the moly shielded him. When she raised her wand to transform him, he leapt forward, sword flashing. Circe gasped, her eyes wide with fear. She fell to her knees, begging him to spare her. Here the story turns. Instead of striking her down, Odysseus listened. Circe swore oaths of peace, promised no further harm, and with her touch restored his companions to human forms. They emerged from their swinish shapes trembling, their eyes filled with shame and relief. Yet Circe was no ordinary foe. She was enchantress as well as queen, beautiful as dawn and dangerous as night. She offered more than safety. She offered comfort. Her hall was filled with abundance. Food, drink, warmth, and the sweetness of her company. Odysseus and his men, broken by years of hardship, accepted her hospitality. Days melted into nights, nights into months. They feasted, they rested, they forgot the lash of the sea and the torment of the gods. For a year, they remained upon Aiaia, lulled into stillness by Circe's charm. Imagine their days, the men lying in the sunlit meadows, drinking wine, their laughter returning. Imagine Odysseus in Circe's arms, his body eased, his mind drifting. Ithaca seemed far away, Penelope a dream half remembered. The spell was not of swine this time, but of comfort, the softest prison of all. It was not until Eurylochus, ever cautious, confronted Odysseus that the spell was broken. "Do you not see?" he asked. "We are wasting away here. Our wives wait at home, our children grow without us. Ithaca calls, yet we lie idle in this hall. Have you forgotten your vow?" Odysseus awoke as if from sleep. His heart stirred, heavy with guilt, yet sharp with resolve. He turned to Circe, demanding release. She did not resist. Instead, she revealed the next step. "Your journey is not yet done. To return home, you must first descend into night. You must travel to the land of the dead. Seek out the shade of Tiresias, the blind prophet, and learn from him the way." Thus Circe became not captor, but guide. She gave Odysseus sacrifices to carry, instructions for the rites of the dead, and warnings of the trials yet to come. The tale of Circe holds layers of meaning. She is both danger and aid, both temptation and truth. To fall under her spell is to lose oneself in comfort, to forget the struggle of the journey. Yet through her also comes wisdom, for she directs Odysseus toward the underworld, toward the prophecy he must face. The contrast is sharp. Circe begins as enemy, becomes lover, then guide. She transforms men into swine, yet restores them. She detains Odysseus, yet sets him on the path again. In her, light and shadow weave together, embodying the paradox of temptation. It destroys and it teaches. As you drift with this tale, imagine Circe's hall. The glow of fire upon stone, the sweet scent of wine, the hush of lions and wolves lying tame at the door. Within, men feast and laugh, their burdens dissolved. Within, a queen of beauty sings, her voice a spell of velvet. It is a place of rest, but also of forgetting. And then, imagine Odysseus standing, his eyes clear at last, his sword at his side. The sea calls to him again, harsh and demanding. Ahead lies the land of the dead, a place no living man seeks willingly. Yet he knows, to reach Ithaca, he must go there. The path home lies not in comfort, but through shadow. So the ships are readied once more. The men, reluctant yet resolved, gather their oars. Circe's island fades behind them, a dream dissolving in the dawn. Ahead stretches night, and within it, the voices of the dead await. As you drift with this tale, imagine the cave, its shadows deep, its silence broken by the crack of bone, the roar of a monster, the whisper of strategy. Imagine the sea at dawn, the ships gliding free, and the voice of a man carried across the water, proud, defiant, unwise. The Cyclops teaches us that victory can turn to ruin when pride eclipses caution. Odysseus had triumphed, but his words chained him to Poseidon's wrath. From this moment forward, every wave, every storm, every delay would bear the weight of that curse. The journey home had become a struggle not only against monsters, but against the anger of the sea itself. The sea carried them onward, but this time, not towards sunlit shores. Odysseus had been told by Circe that to find the path home, he must first descend into darkness, to sail beyond the world of men, into the shadowed realm where no living mortal belongs. His heart trembled, but his will held firm. They reached the edge of Oceanus, the river that circles the earth, where the sun never shines and twilight clings eternal. There, Odysseus and his men beached their ship upon a bleak and barren shore. With hands that shook yet remained steady, Odysseus prepared the rites of the dead. He dug a trench, poured offerings of honey, milk, and wine. He sprinkled barley, then drew his sword. Into the pit, he sacrificed black sheep, their blood dark and steaming in the gloom. The earth grew silent, as though waiting. And then Like mist rising, the shades appeared. Countless souls drifted toward him, pale, voiceless, reaching. Men and women long dead, warriors fallen in battle, nameless multitudes forgotten by time. They pressed near, eager for the blood, eager to speak. Terror filled Odysseus's men, but he held his ground, his blade keeping the spirits at bay until the one he sought appeared. Tiresias, the blind prophet. Tiresias drank from the blood, and his voice rose from the silence. He told Odysseus that Poseidon's wrath would hound him, that his journey would be long and bitter. He warned of dangers to come. The cattle of the sun god, which must not be harmed, the straits of Scylla and Charybdis, where death waited on both sides, the suitors who devoured his house in Ithaca, whom he must slay to reclaim his throne. And then Tiresias spoke of choice. You may suffer, you may wander, yet if you endure, home shall be yours. But take heed, discipline, restraint, memory will be your salvation. Forget them, and ruin will follow. As Tiresias faded, others came. His mother, Anticlea, appeared, her shade thin as smoke. Odysseus, grieving, tried to embrace her, but she slipped through his arms like mist. She told him of Ithaca, of Penelope's sorrow, of Telemachus grown but still yearning for his father's return. Then came the great heroes of Troy, Agamemnon, betrayed and slain by his wife, Achilles, who confessed that glory in death was bitter compared to even the humblest life, Ajax, still silent with anger over the quarrel they once had. Their voices carried both warning and wisdom, shadows of the war that lingered even beyond the grave. The press of spirits grew unbearable. More and more drifted from the dark, seeking voice, seeking life. Odysseus, shaken, feared to remain. He fled to his ship, his men beside him, and they rowed swiftly from that shore of ghosts. Behind them, the land of night dissolved into mist, the voices of the dead fading like echoes upon the wind. As you drift with this tale, imagine the underworld not as fire, but as silence, a land without dawn, without warmth, where memories linger, but bodies are gone. Imagine the shades, pale and endless, whispering of lives lost, of choices made, of truths that cannot be changed. The journey to the underworld was not only a descent into myth, but into the heart of mortality itself. For Odysseus, it was a reminder that every man, no matter how clever or brave, must face the shadow of death. Yet it was also a gift, prophecy, memory, the knowledge that to reach home, he must endure all trials with discipline and restraint. From night, he returned to day. But the weight of the underworld sailed with him, as heavy as the sea itself, with the memory of the underworld still heavy upon their hearts. Odysseus and his men set sail once more into the bright but restless sea. The sun glittered on the waves, but its warmth felt fragile, for danger pressed near on every horizon. Circe's warnings echoed in his mind. Trials unlike any before awaited them. Trials not of armies or enchantresses, but of the sea itself. First lay the sirens, whose voices wove snares sweeter than honey. Their island seemed barren, yet from its rocks rose music that promised truth, wisdom, and joy beyond imagining. Men who heard their song were lured to shore, their ships dashed upon the jagged stones. Odysseus longed to hear them, yet he knew their danger. Following Circe's counsel, he filled his men's ears with beeswax so they would hear nothing. Then, desiring knowledge but not destruction, he had himself bound to the mast, ropes tight across his chest and arms. As the ship glided past, the sirens sang. Their voices rose like waves, promising secrets of gods and men, of Troy and Ithaca, of love and eternity. Odysseus strained against his bonds, begging to be released, desperate to swim toward them. His men, deaf and determined, rowed onward, their faces blank, their eyes fixed forward. At last, the voices faded, leaving silence and sea. But ahead lay a greater trial. The path home narrowed into a strait where two terrors dwelled. On one side lurked Scylla, a monster with 6 heads, each armed with jaws that devoured sailors whole. On the other side churned Charybdis, a whirlpool vast enough to swallow the sea, sucking ships into its maw. Circe had warned there was no perfect path. Steer too close to Charybdis and all would be lost. Sail near Scylla and some men must die. Odysseus chose the lesser doom. As they passed, Scylla struck. From the cliffs her heads darted, seizing 6 men, screaming and flailing, lifted into the air and devoured alive. Their cries echoed against the rocks as the ship raced forward. Odysseus wept, powerless to save them, yet knowing that if he had steered otherwise, none would have survived. As you drift deeper, imagine the siren's song beautiful, irresistible, yet deadly. Imagine the narrow strait, the monster above, the whirlpool below, the ship trembling between them. The trials of Odysseus were not only battles of strength, but choices between sorrows. He survived, but at a cost. For every mile closer to Ithaca, the sea demanded sacrifice. The path home was never paved in victory alone, but in loss, endured with resolve. The sea was restless, as though Poseidon himself churned its depths. But Odysseus and his weary crew pressed onward. They had escaped the song of the sirens, survived the strait of Scylla and Charybdis, but at great cost. 6 men gone, swallowed in screams. Their hearts were heavy, their strength waning, yet still they rowed, their eyes fixed on the horizon, their minds haunted by warnings. Circe had spoken clearly before they left her shore. Beware the island of Helios, the sun god. There graze his sacred cattle, beasts of heavenly light. Touch them not, harm them not, for if you do, ruin will follow. Your ship will break, your men will die, and you alone may be left to wander. These words echoed in Odysseus's mind like thunder. Yet hunger and despair are stronger than wisdom, and the sea has a way of wearing down resolve. After days of storm-tossed waters, the sailors spotted land, an island glowing with golden fields and the lowing of cattle. Thrinacia, home of Helios's herds. Odysseus's heart clenched. He remembered Circe's warning and Tiresias's prophecy from the underworld. Yet his men, worn to shadows, pleaded for rest. Let us land, Odysseus. Let us eat, let us sleep, or we will perish on the sea. Reluctantly he yielded, but he swore them to an oath. By all the gods, by your own souls, swear that no hand will touch the cattle of the Sunday. Hunt other beasts, gather fruit, fish the sea, but harm not these sacred herds. The men swore, though hunger burned in their eyes. They landed, built fires, and rested. For a time, all seemed well, but then the winds shifted. A storm rose, fierce and unending, pinning them to the shore. Days stretched into weeks, weeks into a month. Their provisions dwindled, their stomachs shrank, their faces hollowed. Each day, they gazed at the sacred cattle, sleek and shining in the fields, untouched, grazing in peace. Odysseus prayed to the gods for mercy, but no answer came. His men muttered in secret, their resolve crumbling with each empty belly. Hunger became a beast more savage than Scylla, more relentless than Charybdis. One day, while Odysseus wandered inland to pray, his men gathered. Eurylochus, often cautious, now urged rebellion. Is it worse to die of hunger than by the sea? Let us eat, and afterward appease the gods with sacrifice. Better to die with full bellies than to waste away in misery. The men agreed. They seized the sacred cattle, slaughtered them, roasted the flesh, and feasted. The smoke rose into the air, the fat crackling upon the flames. the scent carried across the island, and though the men ate with desperate joy, the gods were not deceived. High upon his chariot of the sun, Helios saw what had been done. His beloved herds, which shone with divine light, lay butchered. Enraged, he went before Zeus and demanded vengeance. If justice lives, punish these men. If they go unpunished, I will take the sun down to Hades and shine no more upon the earth. Zeus, lord of the skies, nodded. It shall be so. His hand closed around the thunderbolt, his judgment already decided. Odysseus returned to camp, his heart breaking as he saw the slaughtered cattle. He rebuked his men, but it was too late. Strange omens followed. The hides of the slain beasts crawled upon the ground. Their meat bellowed upon the spit, as if their spirits cried out against the crime. Fear gripped the men, but their hunger had already sealed their fate. For a few days, the sea was calm again. They repaired their ship, they set sail, and hope flickered that perhaps they had escaped divine wrath. But the gods are patient, and their punishments come not in haste but in certainty. Far from shore, beneath a sky too still, Zeus loosed his hand. A storm rose sudden and fierce, winds howling, waves towering like mountains. Lightning split the heavens, striking the ship's mast, shattering wood into flame and ruin. The sails tore, the oars snapped, the hull splintered. One by one, the men were hurled into the sea, their cries swallowed by thunder and foam. Odysseus clung to a fragment of the mast, the waves pulling him into the void. Around him, his companions vanished beneath the water, their oaths broken, their lives ended. The sea grew quiet again. But it was a quiet of death. As dawn broke, Odysseus floated alone upon the wreckage. His men were gone, his ship destroyed, his heart heavy with grief. Yet he endured. The sea carried him, tossing him between life and death, until at last he was hurled upon another shore, the island of Calypso. There he would remain for years, trapped by love and longing, until the gods once again intervened. But that is another chapter. For now, the lesson of Helios's island lingers. The tale of the sun god's cattle is one of temptation and consequence. It is the truth that hunger, despair, and impatience can drive men to betray even their own oaths. It is the reminder that divine law, once broken, brings punishment beyond appeal. And it is the sorrow of Odysseus, who, though blameless, bore the loss of all his companions because of their disobedience. Here lies the contrast, the sweetness of roasted meat, the fullness of the belly, against the thunder of Zeus and the silence of the drowned. For every choice carries a price, and some prices cannot be undone. As you drift with this tale, imagine the island of Thrinacia, fields golden with sunlight, cattle grazing in peace, their eyes glinting with divine fire. Imagine the men, gaunt and trembling, their hunger louder than their memory, their hands seizing what they swore not to touch. Hear the crackle of fire, the bellow of sacred flesh, the whisper of doom upon the wind. And then, hear the storm waves crashing, thunder rolling, the ship torn apart. See Odysseus alone, clinging to a splinter of wood, the sea swallowing all else. He drifts not only upon water, but upon fate itself. The sea takes, the gods judge, and memory endures. Odysseus, the man of many sorrows, drifted upon the waves, clinging to the shattered timbers of his ruined ship, alone now, stripped of companions, stripped of hope. He floated at the mercy of the sea. For 9 days he was borne across the waters, until at last the tide carried him to an island veiled in beauty and silence. This was Ogygia, the dwelling of Calypso, a nymph of immortal life. Her halls were woven with vines, fragrant with cedar and thyme. Birds sang in the trees, springs bubbled with clear water, and the air was soft with eternal summer. To Odysseus, half drowned and broken. It seemed a paradise. Calypso found him upon the shore, his body wasted, his face weathered by grief. She took him into her home, bathed him, clothed him, and spoke words of comfort. In her eyes, he saw kindness. In her embrace, he felt healing. For 7 years she kept him there, her love strong, her desire endless. She offered him what no mortal could refuse: immortality. "Stay with me," she pleaded, "and you will never know death. Stay, and this island shall be your eternal home." Yet Odysseus's heart was not swayed. Though her halls were fair, though her love was deep, his soul ached for Ithaca. Night after night he sat upon the shore, his gaze fixed on the horizon, tears falling into the sea. He longed for Penelope, weaving her lonely loom. He longed for Telemachus, grown into manhood without his father's hand. No promise of immortality could silence the call of home. At last, the gods took pity. Hermes descended with Zeus's command. Calypso must release her captive, grief-stricken but obedient. She gave Odysseus timber for a raft, food for the voyage, and a farewell filled with sorrow. Odysseus left Ogygia with heavy heart, knowing he had been loved, yet bound by fate to continue. The sea waited, restless as ever, and ahead lay both trials and triumphs. But through it all, his longing for home burned brighter than the immortal fire Calypso had offered. The gods had tested him across storm and shadow. But at last, Odysseus came near to Ithaca, the island of his birth, the home of his longing. After 20 years, 10 in the war, 10 at sea, he set foot once more upon its soil. Yet homecoming was not simple. The gods who had delayed him still demanded caution, for Ithaca itself had changed. Athena, his constant ally, cloaked him in disguise. Bent and weathered, he appeared as an old beggar, staff in hand, clothes torn and dusty. None who looked upon him would see a king. This disguise was his shield. For danger lurked even in his own hall. Within his palace, Penelope waited faithful, weary, but strong. For years she had endured the presence of suitors, arrogant men who feasted on Odysseus's wealth, drank his wine, and pressed her to choose a new husband. They mocked his name, wasted his goods, and conspired to seize his throne. Telemachus, his son, had grown into manhood, but he too was besieged by their power. Odysseus, unknown, entered this world as a stranger. He saw the ruin of his home, the scorn of the suitors, the quiet grief of Penelope, who still clung to hope. Before revealing himself, Odysseus tested those around him. Would his servants remain faithful? Would his son recognize him? In the swineherd Eumaeus he found loyalty unbroken. In Telemachus, a son ready to stand beside his father. Together, they whispered of vengeance, of reclaiming what had been stolen. Penelope, wise and wary, devised her own test. She announced that she would marry the man who could string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow clean through 12 axe heads in a row. One by one, the suitors tried and failed, their pride breaking beneath the bow's weight. Then came the beggar's turn. Mocking laughter filled the hall as Odysseus took the bow. But with calm strength, he strung it with ease, as though it were an old companion greeting him once more. He loosed an arrow, and it sang through the axe heads, true and unerring. Silence fell. At that moment, Odysseus cast off his disguise. His eyes burned bright. His voice thundered as he revealed himself. The king returned, the husband restored, the warrior home at last. Terror struck the suitors, but it was too late. With Telemachus at his side, Odysseus turned the hall into a battlefield. Arrows flew, spears clashed, and the suitors fell one by one. The air filled with cries, with the sound of justice long delayed. Servants who had betrayed him were punished. Those who remained loyal were spared. The contrast was sharp, years of helpless waiting replaced by swift, merciless action. Chaos reigned, then silence, broken only by the heartbeat of victory. The house was his, once more, cleansed of corruption. Yet even now, one final test remained. Penelope, cautious and wise, could not accept too quickly. Was this truly her husband, or some trick of the gods? She told Odysseus that his bed had been moved. At this, he cried out in fury, for he alone knew the secret. The bed had been carved into the roots of a living olive tree, unmovable, unshakable, a symbol of their bond. Hearing this truth, Penelope knew him. She ran to him, weeping, and their arms entwined at last. Husband and wife, parted for 20 years, were one again. The tale ends not with war, but with peace. Odysseus, who had wandered among gods and monsters, who had faced death and despair, found at last the quiet of his hearth, the warmth of his family, the rest of home. Imagine him now, seated in his hall, Penelope at his side, Telemachus near, the fire crackling upon the stone. Outside, the sea still whispers, restless and eternal, but within these walls there is calm. The long journey has ended. The man of many turns has turned at last to rest. The Odyssey is not only the story of a hero's voyage, it is the story of longing, of memory against forgetting, of loyalty tested by time, of the peril of temptation and the power of endurance. It is the truth that home is not simply a place, but the sum of love, duty, and identity. Light against shadow, exile against return, chaos against peace, the Odyssey holds them all. And in its final moments, as Odysseus rests at last in Ithaca, we too are invited to rest, to let the sea of the mind grow calm, to drift into silence as the story closes.